ELI5 If I flipped a coin a very large number of times and got heads every time, it would seem to be extremely improbable, but shouldn't any sequence of results be just as likely as any other random sequence? Any sequence is likely with a fixed outcome of an event. Same with dice, any one event will result in number 1/6. Each trial has the same odds. The additive probability of the entire trial will only be a factor of how many events were in the trial, not the events. If the outcomes are variable, to where any number possible can be generated, then the results of the trial are very different. We like noticeable patterns and will say the disruption of a pattern in a trial to non-beneficial. Like, the TTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTTT means imperfection, when it doesn't. We just say it is imperfect. Yes, every sequence is 1/2 to the power of the number of flips likely to occur. So choosing any sequence ahead of time is extremely improbable. You just picked a unique sequence that would also be memorable. It's the same as playing the lottery and picking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Just as likely to win as any other combination, but if you didn't win, people would act shocked because it's a memorable set of numbers. Also, keep in mind that the coin has no memory unless it's fixed, and even if you had flipped it 1000 times with all heads, the next flip is still 50-50. Yes, each combination is equally likely. But there is only one combination that gives you all heads. Whereas there are many more combinations that give you all heads but 1 tails, and even more combinations that give you all heads but 2 tails. Half heads and half tails is the most probable because there are the most ways of assembling that macro state. For example, with 2 flips there's one way to get all tails TT, one way to get all heads HH, but 2 ways to get half heads and half tails hide in TH. So in that case, the probabilities are 25, 25, and 50, respectively. Any individual sequence is as likely as any other. But each sequence is a subset of a set of sequences exhibiting some number of heads and tails, with those sets having varying degrees of likelihood. So the probability of a sequence containing 50-50 heads to tails showing up is higher than one containing 100 heads. For example, for 2 flips you would have the following possible outcomes: HH, height, TH, TT. Each sequence has a probability of 0.25, but the probability of getting 1T and 1H regardless of sequences is 0.5 versus the probability of all H being 0.25. The way I heard it explained was this. It's the difference between A. You draw a target on the ground in the middle of a field, go into an airplane, and throw a dart out of the airplane and get a bullseye. B. Go into an airplane, throw a dart out and it lands in the middle of a field. You land the plane, find the dart, and draw a target around it. Yes, landing in any specific spot is equally unlikely, but it has to land somewhere. Choosing which specific spots are significant before doing the task is what makes improbabilities actually improbable. I was bored once and wrote a little Python program, knowing full well what the results would be, to test coin flip sequences. It took as an argument the number of consecutive heads you wanted, then tallied the times the next coin was also heads. I would run it until it got 1000 successful runs, where a successful turn was the number of consecutive heads you'd asked for. I tried 10, 30 and 50. By 50 it was running pretty slowly as it took millions of flips to get 50 heads in a row. Anyway, the result? The next flip was heads 50 of the time. Yes, any other sequence is just as likely, however the ratio of head to tails is not as likely. To make it easy, say you throw it 3 times. Getting Triple H is the only way to get 3 heads. However, if you say you are gonna get head twice, it's way more likely. Because all there was HHT, HTH and THH all flipped head twice. However, if you said you will get HTH specifically, that's just as likely as S only heads. So if you predict the sequence, it's nearly impossible to be right, but if you predict the amount you have at the end, it's way more easy. It is, as long as you're looking at the permutation of the results, and not the combination. Basically, does order matter or not? Look at it this way: if you only flip 2 coins, there are 4 possible results: HH, TH, height, and TT. Each of those individual results is equally likely, but in 2 of them you have 1 head and 1 tail, the order is just different. Likewise, if you flip 100 coins, there are lots of ways to get 50 heads and 50 tails, about 100 octillion, in fact, but only one way to get all heads. If you flipped a coin 1000 times, the probability that it would come up heads every time is 1 to 1000, which is 1 in 10 decillion, with 300 zeros. So, yes, it can happen, but it's extremely extremely unlikely that it will happen. It has the same probability as any other random sequence, but there are so many possible sequences with 1000 coin flips and only one of those many possible sequences is all heads, so hitting that exact one sequence is not very likely. It's important to note the difference between what are the two probabilities you're considering. Flipping a coin 3 times, for example, the sample space list of all possible results is HHH, HHT, HTH, THH, HTT, THT, TTH, TTT. If we take a look, to achieve 3H 3 heads, it's 1-8. To achieve 2H1T it's 3-8. You're right in as much as to get any specific list of results is equally likely, where that thinking falters is when it is not considering the different ways of making the same end result. Basically, every result off of 50-50 you get is less probable than the last. The longer the sequence of heads you get with no tails, the stranger it gets. The way we analyze probability, we point out the odds the coin has a problem are a lot higher than the odds that it just happened to turn up heads that many times. If someone else picks it up and starts getting more reasonable results, that goes away though. But at some point you're so lucky you have to admit it seems fishy. I think the difference is that at some point you will determine that this is not a fair coin. It's true that for a fair coin HHHHHHHHH is just as likely as HTHHTHHHT. If you picked either of these beforehand and flipped them it would be a very improbable event. But if you see the string of heads it suggests another possibility, that the coin is weighted to favor heads. In fact, if you flipped heads 20 times, that is a 1 in a million chance. It's very likely that the coin is not fair. The answer is simply yes. But humans like to think that patterns are so unique compared to the chaos of pure randomness that they must be rarer. It is true that getting a fancy pattern is infinitely rarer than getting random heads and tails, because there are only so many fancy patterns our brain likes. But mathematically, a single fancy pattern has exactly as much chance of occurring than literally any other fancy pattern, and literally any other pattern for that matter. Well, yes. It would be. It's just as improbable as any other pattern, for example always switching, or following the Fibonacci sequence, or always changing pattern every 69 flips. Statistically, any specific result is equally improbable when calculated before the first toss. But as you flip the coin, the results solidify, and the odds of any given results change, with some becoming more likely and others less. At that final flip, the odds of a perfect heads run is 50. I'm not an expert in statistics, but I think you're looking at the sequence as having an even chance, not the flip. Each time you flip you have a roughly 50-50 chance, a bit lopsided depending on coin, but let's go with it. So, any single flip is equally as likely to be heads or tails. Given that, it'd be surprising if you flipped 20 times, for example, and got all tails. Why? You had a 50-50 shot of getting heads all those times, yet you never did. Flipped a coin 7 times in a row and got tails. Made my lucky quarter. Had it all through high school and let me tell you I was a lucky son of a bitch, I could get away with anything. Sold my car with a quarter in it and my life went to A. 4 or 5 months ago I flipped a quarter and it got tails 11 times in a row. I kept it and I've been feeling pretty lucky, even got a promotion. So I'd the answer to your question, but there's some sort of fuckery involved. Yes, but each time you flip the coin you are also increasing the chance that the next flip won't be heads. Each flip is a 50-50 chance. Getting heads 3 times in a row is already a 12.5 chance. It is just as likely as any other sequence, the possibility for Triple H is just as likely as TTT, and you'd have just as hard of a time trying to flip THT or HTH as you would getting tails 3 times, it's only the predictable outcome that is improbable. If you assign H as 1, and T as 1 and just add our result, what is meant by a fair and base coin is your number should be close to 0. How close? Some say if it's less than SQRTN, wherein is total number of number LF tosses. If that sum crosses that, it's completely logical to assume coin is unfair, aka it would seem extremely improbable. That SQRTN number comes from advanced study of several coin tosses, aka binomial distribution. Each toss always has the same chance, but repeated tosses of the same result decreases in probability. It shouldn't be likely to toss a coin 1,000,000 times and get 500k heads consecutively than the other 500k tails consecutively. Just as improbable to get every other 1 tails and every other 1 heads all in one sequence. In short, No real pattern that matters to us should appear if you flip a coin more than 25 times or so. Probabilities do not communicate through time. The odds of getting heads after getting 50 heads in a row is still 1 in 2. That however does not mean that the odds of getting 50 heads in a row is 1 in 2. Odds multiply, so the odds of 50 heads in a row before you flip the coin the first time is about 1 in 1.126 quintillion, if I did my math right. But after getting 50 in a row, the 51st is 1 in 2. You're correct that getting a large number of heads in a row is just improbable as any other specific sequence. But lots of heads in a row is far less probable than the combination of all the hundreds or thousands of sequences that are more balanced. So if you flipped a ton of heads in a row, you'd be right to suspect the coin was unfair, though you'd be wrong a vanishingly small percent of the time. Any particular sequence is highly improbable because there are so many possible sequences. You just don't notice the sequences that don't stand out for any reason. Getting 100 heads in a row would be incredibly unlikely and you likely wouldn't be able to achieve it in an entire lifetime of flipping coins, but the same is true for literally any other sequence of heads or tails of the same length. It's the same chance as any number of H or T. There is nothing special about getting all heads except for the fact that you think it's special. It's improbable because you're aiming for all heads, because it's a 1 in a 2x chance to hit it. It's equally improbable if you're aiming for a special order of H and T because it's also 1 in 2x chance. All H is just one pattern of H's and T's,